See all the people joining. The numbers are going up.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Today is a session about spotting and valuing emergent shifts in the systems. My name is Heidi Peterson, lead principal with Clear Horizon, and I'll host our conversation today with Emily Gates and Jess Dart here with us today. And I'd like to start with acknowledging that we gather on traditional land here in Australia. And so we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and beyond, and pay our respects to elders past and present. And I extend respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and First Nations peoples here with us today. I'm calling in from the beautiful Wurundjeri country, and I invite you to turn your attention to the traditional lands that you are on and the unique relationships held by First Nations peoples with the land, sky, the waters, and seas in the place where you are. So this session today is part of Clear Horizons Ripple Effect series. And today we'll explore new ways to spot, show and value changes in systems. We'll have time for questions at the end, so please use the Q&A functionality and we'll answer as many as we can. And we're also recording this session as a public resource for everyone to be able to go back to. And I'm delighted to welcome today Emily Gates. Emily is an associate professor at Boston College whose award-winning work bridges theory and practice, exploring how evaluation can fuel meaningful, values-driven change in complex systems. And I've benefited a lot from reading Emily's work. So hi, Emily, where are you calling in from today?
Hi, Heidi. Thank you. Calling in from Boston. It's an evening here. We're just at the end of our day.
Nice. Thank you for joining us in your evening. And we've got Jess Dart. Jess is the founder and CEO of Clear Horizon, well known in Australia and abroad for her extensive MEL experience and working as a practitioner at the intersection of evaluation and systems change. And where are you calling from today, Jess?
I'm coming from Melbourne and the lovely sunny day here, and it's not in the evening, so I have pity for you, Emily. I know you've had a full day already. And
Oh,
this is
I should say too, we have inches of snow and ice,
oh,
Jess.
do you really? Okay, I can't imagine that right now. I'm joining from the land of the Wurundjeri people. I also pay my respects to the elders past, present, and acknowledge any First Nations people joining the call today. And I can see that we have 150 people now, in case you were wondering.
Wow. Well, it's so wonderful to have both of you here with us today. And to kick us off, we're going to run a quick poll to learn more about the 152 now I can see guests who have joined us here today. So our poll is, which best describes your role in systems change or evaluation? So do you lead on design, strategy or evaluation? Do you support and contribute? Or do you observe and use results but don't contribute directly? Or are you new to this space and here to learn? So click the one option that kind of best describes your role. And while we're running the poll, I'll just start with a warm-up question for our guests, which is, what's a book, podcast, or idea that's been inspiring your thinking lately? Great, Emily.
Sure. So this is an episode with Jane Goodall from On Being. If people know On Being, it's a podcast with hosted by Krista Tippett. It's a fantastic episode. I think I listened to it 5 times over the last 5 years, and it's called What It Means to Be Human or something like that. And it tells her stories early on, what shaped her relationship to then be who she is and the work that we know her for with the gorillas.
Wow, amazing.
What about you, Jess?
Well, the truth of the matter is mostly what I read is science fiction. So I'm really into Becky Chambers at the moment, which is slow-fi, and it's all about slowly moving through space and like fixing the plumbing and things. But I thought I'd better have a better example. So professionally, what I'm really excited about is human learning systems. I've been reading all about that and Toby Lowe's work on human learning systems and how we can create systems change by sort of changing the way the public sector works and becoming a sort of learning organisation. And I saw this great case study out of South Australia just last week that the Front Project put together, and how they've really made some and got some really good results in child protection systems. So I'm super excited because this work takes a long time and you don't always see the results, but to actually see some results, I'm pretty pumped about that. We'll put those
Amazing.
links in at the end. And at the end, we'll send an email to all the panelists, to all the participants, and we'll include those links in case anybody wants to follow up on the podcast that Emily mentioned or mine. Maybe not the science fiction though. Or we should. You never know.
All right. So can I see the results of the poll now? Is that finished running? I think it's just popping up.
Thanks.
Okay, I see.
No, go
Yeah.
ahead. I see someone in the chat found the video with Jane Goodall. Cool.
Oh,
Thanks for
perfect.
putting, yeah,
Great.
there's a listening version too. Go for it,
All
Heidi.
right. So
Awesome.
55, more than half of you lead or design strategy and or evaluation. So it's great to have you here today. And I can see 5% of you are new to the space and here to learn. And so very warm welcome to those of you who are new today. And we hope that it won't be too technical for you here today. And so I think after all of this warm up, let's jump in. So what we'll do is we'll start with a little bit of thinking about some definitions and specifically, what do we mean when we say systems change? So Emily, what do you mean when you talk about systems change?
I used to like avoid this question, not
Mhm.
wanting to get into definitions, but now I love it, Heidi, and I'm glad we're starting with it. So I first want to say that the word systems change doesn't often make sense to systems people because they say systems are always changing. What are you talking about, systems change? So I like the word systemic change, and it's just a subtle difference, but then to me, systemic means okay, systemic. That's a way, that's an orientation toward change. It's being and working systemically in relation to change. Oh, we've got a slide now, so we'll talk through this in a bit. So there's the systemic orientation, and then, but what orientation to what? What are you doing? You're trying to change systems. And so for me, those are the two pieces. And I use the label systemic change and orientation, and then an object of change, changing systems. The other thing you see on this visual is these hand-drawn overlapping diagrams. We did hand-drawn on purpose because it is not an official process. And that it looks different in different contexts, but systemic change is a process. It's not just like, oh, we're going to say we're doing it. There are discernible phases that we can move through intentionally, or retroactively, we can say that we've moved through them. And this came from some work with a research team that we reviewed 46 guides on systems change. These are practice guides in different sectors all around the world, and identified these being the 5 core phases. So just very briefly on the bottom, you see explore the situation and envision change, then seeing and mapping systems. On the top, finding leverage to actually influence change. On the right, navigating futures. So also considering how things are unfolding and what's different, that uncertainty. And then at the very heart and center, which we'll talk about, evaluating, learning, and adapting. So yeah, that's what I mean. Jess, I'm curious to hear. Let me just pass the mic back to Heidi, so to speak, because we've had conversations about this, and learning
Yeah.
how Horizon defines it is interesting.
Now, firstly, I agree with everything you said, Emily. All of that. I guess so many people coming into the systems change work from different orientations, though, aren't there? That like you can do systems change at all sorts of levels. You can do systems change work on a transport system or a cardiac arrest system, and so I think what defines our work is the scale that we're working at. So we're sort of working at societal systems level. So when I talk about systems change, I often talk about systems transformation. So like you, I'm trying to like define what we do. So we talk about systems transformation, and we're generally talking about systems wide change or whole of systems. By that I mean, for example, and I'll give you an example of the work a bit later. Vic Health is an organisation in Victoria, the state of Victoria in Australia, and they are trying to work on the food system in Victoria, all the various parts of the food system, from supply of food and to the sort of policies and practices of people who sell food and so forth. So the whole thing. So systems wide or portfolio level defines our work. So we tend not to be working at a program level. So for us, it's really important that it's not a program. It's not something that one organization can do on their own. We're normally working across organizations. It's multiple programs. It's multiple efforts, multiple levers. So it could be policy work, trying to influence policy as well as supply of things. So you work on multiple levers. So I call that systems transformation, but it's everything you said, Emily,
Yeah.
plus a little bit more of a boundary about scale. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Heidi, can we pivot to the next slide and talk
Yes,
about
we're
what
just
it's
thinking that.
not?
Yeah.
Because I wonder how you get this too, Jess, but I think it was 2011, 2012, at least when I started studying systems thinking, it was before the language of systems change came up, and a lot of people would talk about systems orientation. It's
Yeah.
all about non-linearity, and there
Mm,
was critique of linearity and logic models.
mm,
What you see now on the screen is from a book which I'll talk about later that I just published with Pablo Vidoyera last year. But we talk about a fix-it logic versus systemic change. And part of our point is that it's not the logic model that's the problem. It's not the program that it's the problem. It's actually our ideas about social problems. That's the problem, so to speak.
mm,
So it's this kind of idea that there is a problem that has a defined boundary, that can have a clear goal. Oftentimes, programs focus on shifting individual behavior because that's easier to measure. And so it's about bringing the best research in, addressing that problem, that need, that disparity through a really targeted program, and then coming in and evaluating it to see if it worked or what
mm,
the impact was. So that we call a fix-it logic because it's really that sort of diagnostic, then make the intervention, and the intervention is supposed to eradicate that issue. Whereas systemic change as an orientation to shift systems are shifting, and we
mm,
bring that orientation into the work. And so it's iterative, it's adaptive, it's ongoing. And this really sort of dovetails and complements what you were saying too, Jess, about multiple levels. Like we need multiple interventions that are designed to work together and to get underneath the drivers of change, right? Like what those root causes are, what the conditions are. And then this idea on the right side, experiments and learning pathways. So even if we use the language of program within a
mm,
portfolio, oftentimes it's not because we think that's going to just work. We're going to get the data and we're going to be done. It's much more, let's learn from what we're doing. And so, I mean, I'm excited we'll get into what evaluation and the role of evaluators means. But one of the core things for me is that it's about inquiry then. It's not about saying, did it work? And then having really good data to
mm.
support that inference. It's much more about what do we want to learn about what we're doing and how do we navigate forward knowing that.
Absolutely. I
And that
totally agree. Yeah.
links, Jess, I think, to then thinking about like when we're following that inquiry, it might look a little different at different phases of systems change. If you want to maybe
Yeah.
go to the next slide, Giovanni, you could talk to
Yeah.
that,
One of
Jess.
the features of systems change, especially some of the stuff that we're doing, which is quite wide scale, is just the bloody time frames. Some practical
Mhm.
element of it is that you can't just you don't if you want to start interacting, using multiple levers, you might be doing some of the work already, but there tends to be quite a long road, a ramp into the work that can take quite a lot of time, where you're not interacting with the system so much, and also because we do this to create population level changes for the planet, that those results can take quite a long time. So one of the features of working at a system-wide level or a portfolio level or cross organizations to try and do this is the sort of timeframes. And I did a little bit of, I remember reading something that the Spark Policy Institute did, Emily, on the impact of collective impact. And the
Mm.
earliest that any successful collective impact initiative got to population level change was 9 years. So I thought, wow, isn't that fascinating? And we always
Wow.
fund in 5-year cycles. So I put this slide together just to sort of say, it's similar to your phases, only it's sort of over time. If you're doing a
Yeah.
long-term piece of big, wide work, you have this foundational phase, which never stops. I have to say, none of the phases stop. You sort of add into them because
Mm.
they're so fluid and iterative and you're bringing different partners together. There's often quite a lot of work to set things up at the beginning and to reposition yourself, and all sorts of things go on. I call that the messy foundational phase. It's all messy actually, but that's the design, the governance, the resourcing, how we show up, how we fund, how we set milestones. There's so many sort of boring revolution things that happen down there. And then once you get programs or things, levers working up and running, you begin to interact with the system. And this is where we're looking at to see shifts in the system that aren't yet sort of tangible results for people and planet. They are changes in how the system is wired almost. So it's how money flows, who's getting voice, who's got power, who's connected to who. Are there new actors connecting with people together? So all this sort of reconfiguration goes on, which we can measure and learn about. I call that the messy middle because it's still not yet what we want, which is so frustrating for everybody that we don't get the results for a long time. Anyway, so all of the phases you talked about, such as sensing the system and mapping, they'll probably, that would be in my foundational phase. So they do relate. I just put it across time. Yeah.
Yeah, I love this, Jess, but also it makes it much clearer what to expect out of evaluators. Whereas like in the 5 phases with those circles that I showed, we just had evaluating, learning, and adapting in the middle. And
Yeah.
one of the big open questions in the field is what is the role of Mel in each of
Yeah.
those phases, right? And this unpacks some of
Yes.
that.
And this is also really, I found that funders have attached
Yeah.
to this diagram as well. Oh
Mhm.
my God, we're in the messy middle. That's why we haven't got any results yet. Now we can measure population level. We can look at the trends. We can understand it right from the beginning, but they might not be shifting straight away. And you really need to know that, right? Because that changes a lot of things, especially 5-year funding. Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, both. I think that framing really helps. And, also when we think about systemic change or systems transformation, we're thinking about both how we work and what we're trying to shift, and really understanding that the process is messy and long. But there are these phases that we tend to see, and that can help evaluators with kind of where to focus their efforts and kind of how to work across those phases. So thank you. And the last part of our introduction here is around the tensions that show up as we try to evaluate systems change. I know there are so many, and all of our guests here today will probably have experienced these tensions as well. But just in 30 seconds, what is one or two key tensions you see a lot when we're trying to evaluate systems change?
I can get us going, Jess.
Yeah, go.
I mean, one of the big ones is just thinking system change is it. Like it's good on its own. Let's do
Yeah.
systems change and not for whom, toward what, and considering the value question. To me, that's a big one. And we've seen that, I know we'll be quick, but we've seen that in a lot of fields in terms of research that we've looked at too, not defining the value. And the other one for me is the one I'm hearing from people, particularly doing the work, practitioners who still have to be accountable to funders, or funders who then have to be accountable to boards of different organizations. And this is the complexity legibility kind of balance. Like we get complexity, but we need to somehow simplify it in a legible way so others clearly understand what we're doing. Or we need to bring all these groups together and get them aligned. So we can't really lean too far into complexity. We've got to be legible.
That's
For me, those
so
are the
true.
two I keep seeing. Yeah.
And like with boards, and I see it so often that the organization really builds muscle in the staff or the actors, and then the boards or the governance group don't.
The ones who have less time, yeah.
Yeah, because they haven't got that thing. You haven't really got their head around because they're not in the work. And yeah, it's how do you communicate that to people, because it's nuanced, isn't it? And it's hard stuff. I totally agree with you. My tensions, I'm going to be really I'm a total practitioner, less of an academic.
Yeah.
So my tensions are often like about the pragmatics of doing the work, which is this time frame. It's an obvious point how long it takes, but it messes with everything, right? Because you don't get the results early on. That you don't get this fantastic result that you can then hang your hat on. So all sorts of things coming around that, managing expectations of funders and managing expectations of people who are, if you're an evaluator, contracting your evaluation, people get so excited and so into this stuff that they really expect results, and they don't necessarily get the sort of results they expect. People who are used to seeing, quantitative changes for people and families and the environment may be very disappointed in the sort of results they get in the first few years, because it's likely to be qualitative, it's likely to be a bit complex, a bit messy, it's likely to be, this changed, but that didn't. Or sometimes there's a reversal. Things are not linear. The progress is so not linear. And then you can have a quick sort of like massive leap forward. I'll talk about that a bit more as we go.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Well, Jess, maybe let's stay with you then, and we could think about what approaches are exciting you now when it comes to
yeah.
evaluating systems change and transformation and trying to grapple with some of these, tensions and demonstrating value.
Yeah. I've been playing around with a few things, and like I'm sure Emily will say this too, but a lot of the methods aren't different, right? So it's still your usual methods and ways of working. It's just the context that's different. But nonetheless, so as the slide I showed about the three phases, the foundational phase, the messy middle, and the results phase, I feel like the messy middle is the most underdeveloped part. Like even the beginning, like we've got developmental evaluation to guide us in the early stages. And the results stuff, well, we all know how to measure out. A lot of people know how to measure outcomes and trends, and we know how to do that stuff. We just want it to happen, right? But the middle part, this messy middle, is quite the results are different, how you work with it is different, and you need to be learning all the time and responding. So that's where I've been focusing my energy. And one of the methodologies I've been framing up is a method called the collective noticing method. So collective noticing has been around forever. Outcomes harvesting, most significant change are all examples of that. But we're sort of like, this is an evolution, if you like, of most significant change. And it is about getting groups of people to observe what they're seeing. And it can be any type of evidence, multiple types of evidence can come into it, and constantly making sense of what they're seeing and adapting to it. I'll give you an example if that makes it more tangible for people. And you can follow up on this example because it's published. So Vic Health, again, I mentioned them earlier, they're an organisation that's funded by tobacco tax, very interesting, in Victoria and slightly under threat at the moment, actually. That's another story for another day. They developed a strategy, which is quite a radical strategy from health promotion, which they just defined three key systems that are holding poor health equity, poor outcomes in place. And one of those is the food system. So they're looking at the whole of the food system. And so what they're doing, they have an evaluation framework that's layered. So they do the typical, like, are we on track with our programs? But then they track two really interesting things. One is what is shifting in the system. And they track it against the Waters for Systems Change, which is policies and practices, resource flows, power dynamics, connections, and mental models, that sort of thing. We'll put the link in there. They track that, and they do it using impact logging. And they also do context monitoring, media monitoring as well, to try and see what's going on. And then they have like quarterly learning sessions where they look at it all together. So that is a really exciting area of development. But even when you do that, how do you know whether you're making progress? So another sort of just the second part to that, which we've also been putting out, is thinking about your theory of progress. How do you think change is going to happen? Like, what models are you using to understand change in this messy middle? So I suppose, a simple idea is that change is like climbing a mountain, that you just have a little bit of change every increment. So that's sort of like, it would be lovely to have that, but I've never seen that in systems change. Instead, what you often get is you get nothing for, if things are really good, you might get nothing, and then you might hit a threshold or a tipping point, and you get a big upturn. So those two are sort of, you can imagine and work with them. But what I'm seeing a lot is the others, where this zigzag thing is you have a breakthrough, but then you get pushed back. Somebody leaves, everything goes back to normal. You have to start again. So you go forward and back and forward and back. Very difficult to manage expectations with that one. I like the one, the tiramisu. I'm really into this one, which is sort of the layers of change, which is understanding that you're building the foundations, the conditions, but you're also trying to shift who has power, who's connected to who, how money and resources are flowing. But you're also tracking like population level changes. So it's almost layered, which is a bit like the Vic Health evaluation framework, which you should really have a look at if you're interested in that. And then there's this idea of the Petri dish, where you have visual attractors, where you sort of really get concentrate on making things work in smaller spaces, place-based maybe, or in a suburb or a community. And what you're hoping is they're going to spread out, which is a really interesting idea. So then if you were on track, you'd see things working really well in small spaces to begin with, and then you'd see some spread out. So I've been having fun with this. So these are the things that I've been getting excited about.
This is so brilliant, and I see a lot of thumbs up and heart. I don't know whether you're supposed to call them emojis or what in Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah, just putting a visual on it, even though it's like quite simple and intuitive, it's pretty radical then in the assumptions that you make and how to interpret the data that you're getting back. Um,
And I should
yeah.
acknowledge, yeah, just this diagram does build on other people's work, as everything always does. So
Mhm.
Charlie Leadbeater's work and the Systems Shift Collaborative, he was the one who was talking about the zigzag. And then I was like,
Oh,
it's not just a zigzag, Charlie. I think there's a tiramisu in there. That's
yeah,
what it comes down
totally.
to.
Always
No, the
finding a way to bring
tiramisu
it back to cake.
coupled with the water of systems change
Yeah,
framework makes a
yeah,
lot of sense for those who are familiar.
yeah.
But I think just when you factor scale in and levels.
So doing this sort of thinking, it doesn't have to be formally written down, but starting to get your head around this, then you can, if you need accountability and you need to sort of like share with your board where you are and what's going, then we sort of identify some progress markers. It might look quite different. They might be, small scale change, or it might be, actually, we're not going to see any results at the population level. We're going to see change in who's got voice, who's connected to who. And that's what we'll be seeing in these phases. Can you see how that helps manage expectations and build trust as well? I think that you're heading in the right direction.
Thanks, Jess. And I feel like actually you've answered a couple of questions that have already popped up in the chat through your description here. And I encourage people to keep popping questions in the chat that we can come back to at the end if in the Q&A session. And what we'll do now is, Emily, what approaches are exciting you when it comes to systems change and systems transformation?
Well, let me pause and say that I am an academic, but I love talking in conversations like this with practitioners because I'm less up to great work myself, right? In my own evaluation work, a lot of what I do is research on evaluation. I try to do field scanning to figure out what's happening there. And so one of the things I want to share is something that was surprising and has been surprising, which goes back to what you said kind of early on, Jess. Um, Evaluating system change is not, or systemic change or transformation. Sometimes there's this idea that we just need new approaches, right? And even in the one you shared, the fundamentals are present.
Oh, yeah.
So what you see on the screen is this idea of like, we're expanding evaluating to be about inquiry. It's not something that experts externally come in and do and then sort of complete and render a judgment on whether you were effective or what a particular intervention did. It is this shared inquiry, but how to do the inquiry is what we already know as evaluators and as MEL specialists, people who work in measurement, evaluation, and learning. And so this little iterative sort of process has at the heart of it value, which is how we've always distinguished evaluation from research. It's about value at the center. You've got to have a clear purpose. And so the purposes are often more about learning and accountability. And adaptation, which we've talked about, clear questions. Sometimes those are hypotheses or other sets of sort of guiding frames. They could be principles as well. And then you've got to interrogate what success means, what good system change means, or what that core idea of progress is, which really gets back to what you were sharing too, Jess. Gather diverse forms of evidence, synthesize them, and then make sense of them together. So to me, this is kind of one of those poor answers to your question about the exciting approach. That why this is exciting for me is because we already know how to do these things well as evaluators. And so each one of them is expanded a bit. There's some reframe. But at the same time, we have so much to offer and bring into the system change process. And I also want to underscore that sometimes there's a rejection wholesale of evaluating. Like it's all about learning and adaptation. And what we try to emphasize is the value piece. Like we actually have to assess progress. And this leads again right back to what you did, Jess. We have to not just learn and adapt, but actually say, are we going the right way? How do we steer differently? How do we take this feedback and then redefine what we're about or what we're trying to do? So that's one. I can't actually remember in the moment. Oh, an example. Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, so the funny thing is like these are everywhere, right? These we call them elements. I mean, evaluative inquiry like this is everywhere. Um, an example that I want to give is there's a international group financing system transformation. I'm a part of the acronym is FEST, F-E-S-T, if you want to look it up. Through that work, this is mostly impact investors going into the systemic investing space. A lot of talk about multi-capital and systems capital. So it's bringing these investors together to actually ask how they could make a difference with the resources they have. Oftentimes, these are capital investments. And we've studied different cases globally to understand what transformation means. And then I've looked at what the value question means and how they evaluate. And so this example is called Nautica. In Colombia, Macaya is the organization. We can drop the link. But they started a platform in Latin America and the Caribbean that basically is a digital dashboard, like a really amped up digital dashboard. But the point of it was to have funders see where the investments are going, what categories the investments are going into, and at the same time, sort of reflect back ideas of what impact in each of those area means. And there's a crosswalk with the Sustainable Development Goals. So this idea of setting up a structured evaluative inquiry using a digital platform, they don't even use the label evaluative inquiry. It's this giant digital platform, but it allows people to have these shared conversations about value across funders, across grantees in different organizations. They also can figure out the measurement piece, connecting it back. But I'm not sure how well I'm illustrating this. Part of the way that it functions is have people interrogate whether the investments are going where they think they should be locally and where there are gaps. And so the evaluation becomes part of the transformation process in the way that it's set up. Um, and yeah, I'm going to stop there. But in essence, anybody can use it to do a kind of evaluative inquiry. It might function differently based on someone's role. And then it's this kind of organizing frame across role, which to me is that sort of evaluation becoming transformational in the way that it's set up.
Can I chip in, Heidi?
Yes,
I was just thinking,
please.
it's such a big change from traditional evaluation to being right in the guts of the engine room. When I do this work, you don't the idea of the evaluator on the outside, who's objective and who's trying to be separate. It sort of falls apart a bit, doesn't it? But you're in service to creating value, aren't you? And it's such a valuable thing for evaluators to do. I want all evaluators to join the fight because we've got lots of work to do, hey? Yeah. What do you think? Well, where's the objective? I know that's not what we were going to talk about. Sorry, I'm
No,
excited.
go for it. Go for it, Jess.
I was just thinking, what do you think about that, Emily? This really, it is a shift in almost stance, isn't it? Even if the methods are the same.
Yeah. I mean, so
Yeah.
I'll react just because I don't know if people know Thomas Schwant's work. He was a mentor and colleague of mine, and I wrote a book with him about values and valuing. He passed away in December
Oh,
last year. So we've been having a lot of memorial events and just like honoring his legacy. And to me, I'm bringing this up because it's been on my mind. And part of his legacy is a response to what you were saying, Jess, which is this shift from thinking we either are objective, completely and nonpartisan and kind of independent, or we've got to pick a side. And so then we have to be clear, what are we advocating for? Whose side are we on? And he really was about a kind of value critical stance, is what he called it. But basically, that idea of we hold space for deliberating about value, that kind of mirror, like we create space to allow people to bring different value perspectives in and then facilitate some dialogue around those. But it's not necessarily the case that evaluators have to have a clear sort of bottom line in their value stance. They might. And sometimes, even if they do, we still have to unpack what that means in a specific context. So I think this is fantastic. I mean, this is what Pablo and I center in our book on systemic change. I think it's really needed. But it's kind of like a small d democratic role. Like a democratic, deliberative kind of role around value.
Oh, now we're hitting on Heidi's favorite topics, aren't we?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we could go there.
That's another webinar, I think, because Heidi's really good
Yes.
work on.
Yes. So I guess maybe just to kind of summarize this for everybody
Thanks,
online,
Heidi.
yes, there are these exciting methods and they're really helpful. But underneath this, it's important to remember that a big part of systems change work and where evaluators kind of can play a big role is this negotiation of value. Like, what are we actually aiming for here? What do we want to see? What do we want the world to look like? And who's going to benefit from this and who actually sees this as good and as valuable? That comes into the heart of evaluating systems
And it's a
change.
human thing. It's not, it can't be
Yes,
done by AI. It's like your book. It's a human
yes,
act. There is no necessarily landing automatically on what's right, what's wrong. And because you get so much unexpected change as well. Like you can't go, oh, how does this fit in with what we said? Well, we didn't think about this, right? We didn't know this was going to happen. Now, how do we judge this? Yeah, so true.
yeah. And really, then we can see how evaluators can, as you were saying, Emily, we become part of the systems change ourselves purely by getting people to interrogate, negotiate value, and people come to greater understanding, shared understanding together. That is systems change in and of itself, and we become part of that as evaluators. Um, so, uh, this has almost brought us to the end of this section before we jump into the Q&A. So I guess what would your closing reflections be? You know, we've been talking about the evaluator and the role of the evaluator. You know, do you have any closing reflections, takeaways for our attendees today on sort of the why and how evaluation plays an important role in spotting and valuing systems change?
Um, I'm taking your pause as a cue that I can jump in, Jess. I mean, to
Mm.
me, one of the biggest ones is learn about it, right? As system change, as systemic change, as transformation, however we want to call it. We'll put a Medium post that I did, which just hyperlinks these 46 guides that are out there. There's a lot of convergence in the field around systems as a practice and shifting systems as a practice. And so for evaluators, if you're trained mostly in the social sciences, program or policy evaluation, like learn about system change as a process so that you can go beyond just population level indicators, right?
Yeah.
That there is a process, it matters, and we should measure and monitor it. And then that sort of collaborative piece, like to really do evaluative inquiry or evaluating or MEL, however we call it collaboratively, I think is a takeaway. It's exciting. It means we need to be clear about what the fundamentals are, which is why I highlighted some of those elements. But it also means doing what you do, what you both do and all of you do at Clear Horizon, which is like really work with people of different roles and have the conversations in the languages that they use, in the entry points of where they're at and really sort of flex, right? And be responsive. And that is I'm curious what you say, Jess, because I feel like that's a
Mm.
takeaway for me and not necessarily a strong suit. So I love seeing what you were up to in that space.
Yeah, I mean, I guess back to what I've been reading, human learning systems, and to me, the critical role of iterative social learning in this. If we're going to change systems, if we're going to address some of the biggest challenges that humans have ever faced, that we're heading towards today, you know, we are going to have to get better at iterative social learning, because the answers aren't obvious, and we're going to have to work through divides and polarities and differences. We're going to have to dialogue, and we're going to have to get better at deliberation. And I think evaluators have got a really important role in that. And it's all about bringing people along, isn't it, on the journey and having bigger conversations, collaborative. So I'm totally with you on the collaborative element, which is really dear to our values at Clear Horizon.
I'm
I mean,
smiling this so we can put a pin in it and talk more about it.
yeah. And I guess, and again, back to the sort of boring revolution as well, is that we're going to have to rethink how we contract, how we govern things, how accountability works, how we set targets. Good old-fashioned KPIs are not going to work in this space. So there's quite a lot of what some people call the boring revolution to do as well, is like to be able to work this differently. The things around it, the infrastructure around it has to shift as well, and that takes work too. So there are conditions that need to shift with it, and boards need to understand this and change how they govern. Accountability for learning rather than doing exactly what you said you would do. doing exactly what you said you would do in this space means it's not working, right? You need to be learning and moving forward and discovering. It's a journey of discovery. It's not preset. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Great. Thank you so much both for that summary and for everything you've shared with us today. I've so enjoyed having this conversation with you. We're going to jump into a Q&A in a minute. So this is a chance if you've got some questions bubbling up, please put them in the Q&A function. And you can also upvote questions that you might thought, I wish I'd asked that question, upvote it, and then we'll see that lots of people want that question answered. So just while people are adding some more questions in the chat, I'll just do a few shout outs. So Emily's book, Evaluative Inquiry for Systemic Change. I think in Australia you can buy it on Amazon or wherever you order books from locally. It's published by Sage and you can read the Kindle version. And for Clear Horizon, if you're interested in learning more, we have a 6-week course starting mid-March on systems transformation, strategy and evaluation. So it provides a lot more knowledge and resources for those working in systems strategy and evaluation, as well as some other courses, the complete guide to MEL starting in late March and the developmental evaluation course in April. And as a thank you for attending today, we've got a 15% discount off those courses if you book before the end of February with a code. I think it's web15 off, but we'll share all of that with you after the webinar. So now for the last kind of 19 minutes or so, we'll do some Q&A. And our first question, which a couple of people have added on, is from Kate. And this is for you, Jess. So this is, could several theories of progress be in play all at the same time? And someone has commented, which made me laugh. Yes, I was thinking there is an important relationship between the Petri dish and the tiramisu, a sentence I never thought I'd write. And Judy here asking for maybe an example or two as well.
There's normally two, well, I should have said that. Thank you for asking that question. There's normally more than one in play at the same time. These are obviously archetypes. So, I mean, I guess it's working out. I thought, for example, the example I gave for Vic Health, I don't know how they feel about me saying this, but I think they're Petri dish and tiramisu. Exactly, because you might be working on the conditions at sort of statewide level, like as this whole of Victoria, which is state in Australia, but then they're zooming in on locations and places to sort of try and get more concentrated outcomes and make that work there, that might spread or it might influence policy. So it's quite common to work at two levels in a bigger strategy, and if you work, and that might include the tiramisu and the Petri dish, and then even the hockey stick can come in, because you can expect, you can say, but we're not actually going to see anything for the first 2 years. This is really hard for people to accept. We're not going to have any results in the first 2 years. Nada. We might have learnings. We might have art shifts in how we're showing up. We might be able to see that we're adhering to our principles and ways of working in ways we never have before, but there might not be actual system shifts. There might not be instances of impact at all. Imagine that. So that's yeah. So you can have, I reckon you can have all of them going on. If you've got some of the mountain, good on you. I want more mountain. I don't tend to get mountain. Yeah.
And I think picking up on, there was one kind of question that someone else had asked about, did they change over time, their theories of progress from the start, through the messy middle? And I would say, of course, the theories of progress are going to adapt and change.
We've put this out on LinkedIn and it's going crazy. And so really welcome you to share your other theories. Yes. At the end of the day, I think theory of progress is going to be different for everybody, but it's another layer, isn't it, of thinking of trajectories. And that they're not always linear. Yeah.
Thanks, Jess. So we have another question, which was highly upvoted from Andrew, which is, can we kind of speak briefly to the differences in a theory of change aimed at describing systems change as opposed to a program or an organizational theory of change? Jess, this might be one for you to start with, and then Emily, add your thoughts on it.
We have our own particular way of doing this at Clear Horizon. Like, bad habit is to make your own ways up. But anyway, what we tend to do is we do theory of change a lot, and not everybody does in systems change work. They will do system maps as the main artifact, like systems, causal loop analysis and things like that. But we still love a theory of change here. So what we tend to do is we do a two-step theory of change. We do what's called a global theory of change or a theory of transformation. first, which is not, it's not about what we're doing. We're not really, we might be one part of it, but there's lots of other parts. It's just trying to get a sense of, what does good look like? How would the system be configured if it was how we wanted it to be? And how does everybody need to shift to make that happen? So that sounds hideously complex, right? But we sort of do it lightly, hold it lightly, and keep changing it. And then from that, we decide where we want to intervene as an organization or as a network. So we want to do this, we want to do that, and do this. And at any point, you can come back to the bigger picture of the whole. So I think if you're doing systems change work, you probably need two levels of theory of change. The everything one, and the which you could call theory of action. Some people call it theory of action. That's how we do it.
I have one thing to add, and I'll be short, which if anybody wants to Google it, you can find actor-based theory of change. It's an approach I really like that, so this answers the question sort of directly. Oftentimes logic models, theory of change that uses, that focus on program or projects centers activities, like resources go into activities. Actor-based theory of change will look at actor level shifts and how they co-produce higher order system level shifts. And so it's like, that's a concrete way you can see examples of sort of how that looks different than if you were doing a theory of change that rests on activities.
Well, that's amazing. Like 20 years ago, we wrote a paper on people-centered program logic and got really...
There you go. Maybe it's cited an actor-based theory of change. This is Drew Valeros and John Main. And
I was working with John Main back then, yeah.
So they evolved it. Yeah. There you go.
There you go. I'm
All right.
To be around for long enough to see these things come twice. But yeah, really good to focus on the people, I reckon, and you can a prelude to, we don't go straight even into global theory of change. We'll often do some systems mapping before that, or actor mapping before that. And then, so, there's lots of different ways of doing it. But theory of change, I still think it's really useful. And Vic Health did that 3 global theories of change for each system, which has been really useful. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Thanks, both. Okay, so we have another question from Marwan, which is, and we'll start with you on this one, Emily. So what I am noticing from developing and applying a systems-based MEL is that it is crucial to highlight that while results may take a long time, we can still monitor for and report on signals of impact showing we are on track to achieving these outcomes. The more I think about it, the more I'm convinced it's one good way to work around the tension of the reality of long timeframes to achieve transformative systemic change and the need to report on something in the meantime. Would love to hear your views.
Oh boy. Yeah, I mean, I think it rests in the theories of progress that Jess shared to some extent. Because you don't want to be setting up not only people for disappointment, but you don't want to set them up for consequences that aren't justified, right? Or that aren't really legitimate. So I think that idea of unpacking assumptions about how the shorter, more proxy types of things you want to measure are related to or co-contribute to the higher order things is extremely important. So in some ways, we're circling back to that idea of theory of change, even if it's a set of assumptions. I think just measuring things in a short term and in a longer term in order to have something to share is insufficient. I think you've got to have those causal pathways, the logics, the set of assumptions that underpin that. And we've talked a little bit about systems mapping. Actually, Jess was just saying systems mapping, actor mapping. There are different diagram techniques that also support collaborative learning. And in doing those, it helps you name some of those assumptions. So basically, I'm trying to say that, like for us in the book and in the phases, we look at systems mapping and leverage points together, but that actually allows you to make a real clear argument for what you measure in the short term. It's not just that you have something in the short term.
Yeah.
And Emily, oh, sorry, you go, Jess.
I was going to say, it's like what your signals, I mean, the idea of signals is good, right? It's a good idea.
You got to know it's a signal though, right?
Yeah.
It's got to
How
be
do you know it's a signal? Like, you often have to have some sort of idea, theory, change, map, understanding of what might happen, because it's not linear. So sometimes it's not just you just get a little bit of it and a little bit of it. You don't, it doesn't work like that. It tends to be something quite different that might be, and you're going to do a bit of thinking around that. It's quite hard. to get good progress indicators. I think that is the point. It's quite hard to do that, and that is a missing, underdeveloped piece. And we are going to have to think about trajectories of change and why because you get pushback. Sometimes pushback, resistance, people being angry is a good sign because, yeah, it means some
Yeah,
people need
Jess,
to shift.
I want to sort of add too, I think this is why the indicators can't stand on their own. The
Yeah,
conversation matters, right? The sense
yeah.
making around it
Sense
matters too.
making and the
So like,
theorizing around what's going on. What does this mean?
yeah, because then, yeah, I know we have more questions, but I feel like those have to go
An
together.
equity lens, who's not getting voice, whose perspectives are we not? There's a whole thing about perspectives in this as well that we could talk. Emily and I could talk all day, by the way.
Well, I was thinking about this when you were talking about the systems mapping and the importance of doing that, Emily, that's a place where another place for negotiation amongst stakeholders around how do we actually understand the system and how do we see it? That's a whole place for bringing people together and deliberating and sense making together, kind of even before you get into deciding the indicators and that sort of thing.
Mm.
All right, so we've got another question from Keisha, from Fiji, I assume, Keisha. So with shrinking donor environments, as we are now seeing across the globe, how can we convince investors, donors, prospective funders that systems change is the way to go?
There's a fantastic video. I can find the link and send it. I think one of the inspirations I'm having is in the systemic investing space, where traditionally there was a real desire for like reducing and controlling risk and having a real monetary profit off of whatever the investment was or from the investment. And there's like a shift in frame to say we've got to work together if we care about these larger impacts. And so to me, there's a video I'll drop the link for. I think part of the case is asking why, right? Like, why do you want to accomplish that? And like, and if you go a couple layers underneath the why, you realize that the sort of higher order or broader types of impacts are going to be co-contributed from different people, and there's going to be a limit in one funder having the kind of power and authority that they might want if that's how they're sort of entering into the conversation. So quite pragmatically, it make sense for them to think about collaborative work to sort of maximize their contribution and their role. And then there's really great, exciting stuff in the equitable evaluation and racial equity in evaluation, where funders are then asking themselves questions of what is their responsibility as a funder. I think that's another important entry point, which is not just about how do you have bigger, broader impact, but it's about who are you and why are you doing the work as a funder. And then there's a shift in power and there's a shift in there's a movement towards collaboration, not even about sort of an impact and achieving an impact, more about being in integrity about how you want to do the work of your role as a funder or investor. Yeah. Anyways, those were very quick answers. But Jess, I don't know what is top of
The
mind.
other thing I think is like it's obviously all about us getting better at communicating why. But I think one point that is like a lot of things that we've tried are no longer working. Like working at a programmatic level is not yielding results for most people. So if people are being willing to be honest that what they're doing and how they're funding things is actually not showing any results right now, then there is a case to work differently. That's something that I have noticed is quite persuasive. If you really want results, then sometimes the world is interconnected.
I know, I'm thinking of the word sustainability too, just when you say that. Even if you show results in 3 years and then you go back 8 years later and you expected the thing itself to be sustained and the results to be sustained, I think people have said, okay, we get that that's not realistic in most things. Yeah.
I do think systems change is almost like the new sustainability. It's almost like it's the same thing. But we've understood more now about how to be sustainable, how to have sustainable impact. You have to shift the underlying conditions. Otherwise, as soon as you stop providing whatever you're providing, back to status quo. Yeah.
Yes, and I will very briefly say, to me, the concept in the book we use is the idea of system stewardship, which is like an
I love
ethos,
that,
right?
yeah.
So it's not just about sustainability because you want to have more impact over a longer time frame. There's more systems awareness, right? and responsibility and that sort of co-stewarding. To me, that's part of the heart of it that's really important. As people get that kind of awareness, then it becomes a more intrinsic
Yeah,
like way
system
of thinking.
stewardship is such an interesting concept. It's gaining a lot of ground here in Australia.
Okay, nice.
Although
Yeah,
let's not, I think let's,
let's go
well,
hide
we
it.
might
Yeah.
box off stewardship for
Yeah.
another
Okay.
webinar. Um, I've got a question that someone's put in that I'd love to end on, which
Okay.
is for the 5% of participants who are here to specifically learn and strengthen their evaluation practice, although I'm sure it's actually more than the 5% who are new to the space, what key skills do you believe evaluators need to develop to remain effective in a rapidly changing environment and in this really important systems change work? Maybe you could each pick one skill.
I say to my staff, you all got to be facilitators as well as being good at quantitative and qualitative data. Although you can work in teams, but I think being able to facilitate and help conversations happen and help sense making happen is really key.
Mine would complement that. I would say draw. I can't draw, but I'm teaching a systems class right now, and students will be like, "Oh, I don't draw." I'm like, "You do now." Like, we're gonna diagram. We got to put our ideas and assumptions together, and we've got to do it collaboratively. So play around with, whatever it is you're doing. Put it on paper in some sort of mind map and some sort of diagram. Um, anyways, that's what I would say because it's a real important thing in a lot of
Even
systems.
crappy drawings. I draw all the time.
Oh, super
I'm
crappy. I mean,
awful.
I
They're
like
terrible.
stick figures and little symbols, but to me, the idea is about being transparent and accessible in your assumptions so that you can like share your paper and then talk about it. Yeah.
So good. And I feel like both, well, firstly, when I'm forced to draw with my 3-year-old for hours on end, I'll think of it now as work training and I'm practicing my little diagrams to be able to draw. But also, both of your skills, I think, are about being able to work with people and bring people together to engage. And that was really comes back to the heart of what we said at the start, which was that this work is all about determining value with people together. So that's awesome. All right. Is there anything else that either of you wanted to say to close out our discussion today before we finish up?
I would just encourage evaluators, if they're not in the systems space, to think about joining because there's a lot of work to do. I'm sort of quite passionate about the fact that this is what's needed for the future of the planet. And we've got a role to play if you have evaluation skills. All those skills that we use in program evaluation, they're all relevant here, all the methods. It's just a sort of different stance to a degree. So, you need it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to process some of the questions as I was thinking. Yeah. I don't know. It's true that the source of our expertise shifts, but at the same times, there is a couple sort of comments or questions around how to bring people who have limited time and other expertise together and also not overpromise like what we offer as evaluators. And I think that those all go together when you're really doing things across roles. There's a sort of humility to your expertise. And there's an acknowledgement that comes in that of like, okay, here's what I bring and here's what I don't bring. And I think that that is, anyways, going back to your earlier question, I think that that's essential. And the I'll say the same thing again. There's a lot of great systems guidance. Just look, Omidyar, they have a great one. There are a bunch out there, and the systems mapping book. I wanted to shout out that too from Pete Barbrick Johnson and Alex Penn. There's an open access, So if you're new and you want to check out something, just check out one thing, and there's open access things, and see where that takes you.
And of
Yes.
course, the Clear Horizon course, which is not
Oh yes, 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 yes. Yes, it's on the
Yes.
Clear Horizon course.
That's sort of a good introduction, actually. Gives you a
Yes.
bit of a overview of the whole journey.
Yeah.
But yes, there's lots of free resources and books as well.
Yeah, Absolutely. All right. Well, I think we're at time. So thank you so much, Jess and Emily, for joining me and everyone on the call here today. We'll be sharing links to the resources mentioned in the discussion today. And at the end of the webinar, a short feedback survey will pop up, and you'll also receive the survey via email if you don't have time now. And your feedback will help us plan future webinars. And I, for one, would love to get Emily and Jess back together for some more topics to explore. So your feedback is super valuable. And thank you so much for joining us today, and have a lovely rest of your day
And
or
thank you,
evening.
Heidi. You managed to control us. Well done.
Yeah, thank you for moderating, Heidi, and the staff behind the scenes at Clear Horizon as well for setting this up.
And thank you to all our participants. Have a lovely day.
Bye bye.